Hello and welcome. Sue and Randy Pinto here from Third Option International, along with Mike and Andrea Buckley. Thank you for joining us. This is a recorded version because we cannot do it live tomorrow. If you're watching this was recorded on Saturday, and we're grateful to Mike and Andrea for being willing to do this a little early. So Mike and Andrea, thank you and hello.
Hi, Randy and Sue.
How you doing today?
Good, good.
The sun is out, so we are good. You're coming to New York, and finally there's sun. So
Thank you.
yeah. So let's dive into this week. Last week we talked about power struggles, and you had alluded to the fact that it's very much related to this week's topic, which is control issues. So can you just explain that?
Well, let's recap quickly about topic 4, the power struggle. Some of the highlights there that I hope people took away from that was it's not about a competition. It's a win-win situation we're looking for. And we like to say when one of us wins, we both lose. So that was a big thing to think about when we first heard that. And the success of it is in learning how to cooperate and meet in the middle, as we talked about on the balance line. And I know for myself, another thing that I took away from the power lesson was this: would I rather be right, or would I rather be in a relationship? And that really helped me, and I hope it helps others to focus that it's a choice. It's a conscious choice. Perhaps you are right, but is it worth jeopardizing the relationship? There's a lot of thought that really needs to go into that. Do I really want to find a solution that's going to make us both happy? How can we meet in the middle? Or do I just want to be right and sitting by myself? So get on the same team. We're on the same team together. And as you know, it's a lot of work. We have to work on it every day. So with those things, I think those are the highlights.
Right. And if I have to ask myself, am I the person that's powerful, it has to be my way, or am I the powerless person? And that's where it ties into the control lesson we're going to talk about now, is because, like power, controlling or being controlled, powerless, they go together. And the power part of it is being win-win. You want to be in the win-win situation there, which means both of us are really working on a relationship. That's what we're trying to do. That's what Third Option is all about. So as we go into the control issue for tonight's lesson, we talk about people that are out of control. They just don't know they have no idea how they're living their life. They're just letting someone else control them in many cases. And then on the other side, are you a controlling person? It's got to be my way. I'm used to it from day one, and this is the way it's going to be. Well, how fair is that to the other person? That's where we get into trouble.
Yes, I think maybe it's important to look at this topic with the balance line right up front. Sometimes we do that towards the end, but these talks 4 of power and 5 of control, they're kind of closely intertwined. And the first one is about winning, as Mike said, in power, but now this one is really about autonomy. And are we really going to find that middle ground where we use self-control in a lot of the interactions between ourselves and circumstances in our life? So, for example, one side of the balance line is this out of control. We're doing a recap. If you were doing a whole session, this topic has some really good skits in it. And one of them, they talk about a runaway car that we can just picture briefly, going down a hill and discovering you don't have any brakes and the car's out of control and all the emotions that you feel as you're going through that. That's a circumstance in your life. It could be you're out of a job. It could be your house burnt down. It's circumstances that make you feel like you're just out of control. Who's really in my life making all this, guiding this path? And it can be an incident or a thing, but it also could be a person. So you might look at other and ask yourself the question, if you're feeling out of control, it could be that you think some other person is controlling in your life. Maybe you feel like you're being controlled by your children, by your parents, by your spouse. So it could be a thing or it could be a person. And as Mike said, the opposite side is this overly controlling element. Now, I can see myself on both sides sometimes, and being in control can make a person feel safe. That fear that might feed that, if you're holding on and trying to control things that are different than yours, trying to keep things rigid, it can give you a false sense of safety and security. But I think an important thing to remember in this lesson is that control is really an illusion. Okay? And that I think is important to think about. I don't know if that triggers any thoughts on your side.
Yeah, I feel like, when you said the word fear a little bit ago, just thinking about that stuck in my head, because I talk about this with my kids a lot, is that people often do things, make decisions based out of fear. So if there was a situation where, and I'm relating this to my kids, if there's a situation where at school friends aren't being kind, or they're sort of getting pushed out of a group, they feel like they're out of control. And so then they might start making decisions based on fear, which I think relates to anybody, is that now you start making decisions like, ooh, I'm afraid to be left alone. I'm going to do these things for this group. I'm going to make some probably poor decisions just to be a part of this group so that I'm not the one left on the outside. And I think that does for sure go into relationships. If you feel like your life is out of control, like you said, out of work or other circumstances, that then you start just kind of making decisions based out of fear and not necessarily what truly is going to help your situation or help your relationship.
Well, I think, when you said people act out of fear, what comes to mind for me is it's a reaction and not a response, and it's not thought out. So fear becomes a reactive behavior, and reactions are usually generally not healthy or correct. So I tie in that reaction with the fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, Randy. And, there are other areas that when we're out of control, it becomes a problem in our life, like time management, finances. You just went over the emotions like anger, hurt, self-pity, and the fear factor. And then habits and addictions also make a difference when we're out of control, because someone else is driving us, or something else is driving us, and then we are out of control. So we have to be careful about that person also that is controlling. They're bullying, they're threatening, they're intimidating, almost like blackmail or ultimatums. They never work. It hurts us. And manipulation is very real. And there's manipulation in a lot of relationships. But those are the relationships, especially in marriage, where things are going to go south. They've been south for a while. And once that controlled person says, I just can't do this anymore, they're heading for the exits. And then a lot of people are going to suffer because of that. So it happens with spouses. It happens with parents, as Andrea said. It happens with our children. So the thing that we're really looking for, and the third option, is self-control. Self-control is the only way we can have any kind of impact on control issues. I can't control Andrea. She can't control me. And it's healthy when we don't try to do that. But it happens so much. And that's what the third option is. It's making sure that we control ourselves and we control ourselves only. That's it.
Yeah,
Right.
as is illustrated here, the self-control front and center, that is the third option. And that's the best place to start.
Mhm. And, you know, when I think of the other end of the balance line, Mike, we've just discussed the out of control, but the controlling side of the balance line, you think of the exercise as if you have a remote, one of you has a remote control in the relationship. And so the other person becomes like a robot. The person that is in control has everything or rigid the way they see it, and they just are demonstrating, imposing commands on another person, and eventually to the point where that person may get so angry and have all the anxieties and feelings that we just described from feeling controlled, that they will just walk completely away from the situation to get away from the overly controlling, rigid person. So we have this struggle and this pull often in relationships. And again, it's important to realize control is an illusion. It's really important. We do not have the right to control our spouse, and our spouse does not have the right to control us. And it really, I like to think of an example of a little kid, a little child, like 2 years old or 3 years old. They're running around and you want them to sit down. And they just won't sit down. So after trying and trying, you finally make them sit down. Either they're doing timeout or they're in a chair, and you feel like you are in control, and they're sitting down, and they may be struggling and squirming and spitting and doing everything, but they're sitting down. And I like to say that you think that you've won, but inside that little toddler is standing up. You may have made them sit down, but their spirit, the person that they are inside, you've made them comply, but they still are a person underneath that themselves. And in many situations, you might think that you've got that under control, but in the other person, the other partner, there's emotions there. They may look compliant, but it's deeper than that.
That actually, I think, is a really powerful image. I'm thinking about that. That actually hit me the most in terms of, really, recognizing that, even though, like you said, you think you've got it taken care of, but the other person now is starting to feel those emotions of resentment, fear or whatever, and that just is undermining the relationship. And I think that happens a lot, with obviously in relationships, partners, but also in parent to child, or employer employee. And I think the big thing to realize is recognizing that you don't really have the control. You've just kind of squelched somebody else temporarily, but their emotions are now probably changing, and probably not changing for the better. They're changing for the worse. Mm-hmm. That actually is that's really great.
Well, and it just shows you that it's a universal dynamic and universal behaviors. Well, we're focused on the relationship dynamic. If you can improve these behaviors and habits, they will help the dynamics of all other relationships as well. They're that powerful.
Yes. And I think in summary, we're looking at the situations, so to speak, in the relationship. And in the middle, that's where our work has to be done. We always say it's self-control. I mean, that's a big job right there. Looking at our own life, looking at the situation and saying, and identifying, okay, what did I contribute to this? What can I change from my own perspective? How can I gain self-control? What's my job? What's my work? And far better than trying to control others.
That's right. And as we look at the summary and takeaways from this topic. Being in control usually makes us feel safe. We all have different roles that we play in our marriages. And sometimes one person's been used to having their way and being controlling. The other person out of control has succumbed to that controller, yet they are angry inside, and that just isn't healthy. But being in control of me or self-control is a full-time job. It means we have to make changes in our life. And that means it's hard for that person that's been given the role of being the controller for so long. They're not used to that. So it's going to be a very tough adjustment period for them, especially when that other person stands up for themselves and takes control of themselves. And, detachment means realizing that my spouse is a separate person. I can't control them. I shouldn't have any way of trying to control them. That's their job. And therefore, self-control is the name of the game.
Mm-hmm. And I think two things to just go over again to distinguish maybe where we are, because just because we're on one side of the balance line doesn't mean we can't see ourselves sometimes on the opposite side. So let's go by the feelings. If we feel safe, we're being in control. That's what makes us feel safe. When we feel controlled, when we're being controlled, we're feeling angry. So if we're on that side, we're feeling angry. When we're in control, we feel safe. So maybe if we go to the feelings, we'll see what part of the balance line and identify where we need to be.
That's a great exercise, Andrea. I think that's, as with any of this, I think the big thing is first recognizing, and being willing to recognize where I am. We each have that responsibility to recognize, hey, I'm kind of, over on the left over here and this end of the balance, and I'm not really doing what I should be doing in order to get to the center. I think that's the big thing, is to recognize in ourselves where we are. So really that brings us to some of those questions to consider during the week in relation to ourselves. Am I in control of myself? Does someone or something else control me? Do I exercise control over my emotions and habits? And I think that one's probably a big one for people, is because, like Randy was saying before, we tend to react, and we tend to react emotionally and quickly, in an explosive way sometimes. And that can be a challenge to sort of start to bring that back and recognize, okay, I can't just react emotionally. I have to kind of bring it back, slow down, think before you respond in a more appropriate way. Do I have my own identity? Do I allow my spouse to push buttons? Do I let my partner bully or manipulate me? And I think that one can be kind of hard, because that one I think taps into that whole inferiority thing maybe. And recognizing that in yourself, that you have the power you have the responsibility to stand up, and you have rights, and to say, no, I need to be heard. I have the right to be listened to, or whatever. So can I trust my own judgment, and where do I need some work?
The other one that's not necessarily there, which is maybe too slippery, but relinquishing control intentionally is a form of control, right? So if you just give up and say, here, you, right, and toss it over, and so then that, regardless, it's relinquishing, but it still causes the imbalance, right?
That's true.
And that's not, and again, it's just another thing that's not healthy.
And I think
I think sometimes, Randy, that those are the kind of people, as I described with the robot, if you do that too much, those are the relationships where someone's out the door. They just walk away because of that. They've relinquished so much to a controlling person. So that's important to remember. And I also think we should take away from this lesson that neither side, whenever we put up the balance line, we're not putting that up to say one is right and the other is wrong. Because we can be on either side of the balance line every day with different issues. And we might see ourselves more one way than another, but I think it's important so that we don't view the other person as the enemy. When you can see yourself on both sides, you realize how much you really do need to work to the middle.
True.
Yeah, that's important. We're going to finish up with the questions we just did to yourself. So now we have to think about the questions in terms of our partner. In what ways do I feel a need to control my spouse or other circumstances? And that, I think, happens a lot in relationships, manipulation. Do I ever bully or manipulate my spouse? Do I ever take advantage of their vulnerable feelings to get them to do what I want? And here's what Randy was talking about. Can I begin to relinquish on something? Can I begin to relinquish some things, decisions or I don't know, whatever. But so those are some of the things questions to ponder in relationship to your partner. Anything else for this? Anything else on those particular questions, Andrea or Mike? Any thoughts on those?
I can't think of
No, I
anything.
think you covered it very well. That's our homework. Those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves as we go throughout this week and see which side we're on. And if we do change sides and go from controlling to being controlled, we have to know that. Once we're aware of it, that's when we can start to think about it and make that self-change, which is what third option is about. It's about self-change. We're finding in all of these topics, we can't change the other person. If we do, it's futile. And that's why we're going to be in the trouble that we're in.
And that's a great point, because I think that's the fatal flaw that's probably the most common, trying to change somebody else first.
That's it. That's it. You're right, Randy. You've got it. So
we look forward to seeing you again next time. And I happen to really like the next topic, listening beyond the words. The art of listening, very interesting. Certainly a topic we could all use a little improvement in, and it's huge, makes a huge difference in how we resolve a lot of these issues that we all struggle with. So we're looking forward to going over that one next week.
Oh, okay.
Oh gosh, excellent. Well, Mike and Andrea, have safe travels. Thank you again for today. We will be live next week. So to everyone who watches, please keep well.
Same to you.
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to seeing you.